The morning of my son's wedding, I put on the suit I'd worn to his college graduation 8 years ago. It still fit. I'd lost a little weight since then. Working 40 hours a week in a warehouse will do that to a man, even one past 60. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and straightened my tie. Navy blue with small silver stripes. My wife Eleanor had picked it out before she passed. I figured that made it the right tie for a day like this. My name is Walter Briggs. I'm 63 years old. I drove trucks for 31 years long haul, coast to coast, sometimes gone 3 weeks at a stretch. I miss school plays and birthday parties. And one Thanksgiving when my rig broke down outside Amarillo and I ate a microwave burrito alone in a truck stop at 11 o'clock at night. I miss things I can't get back. But I was never late on a bill. Never once. My son Daniel is 31 now. He works in finance in Chicago. Makes more money in a month than I used to make in 4. I'm proud of him. I want to be clear about that from the start. I'm proud of what he became, even if I'm not always sure where the boy I raised went. His fiancée, his wife now, I suppose is named Courtney. Courtney with an EY at the end, which she mentioned when we first met, gently correcting me when I wrote it with a simple I. She's from Naperville. Her father owns 3 car dealerships. Her mother chairs some charity board downtown. They're good people, I think. They just live in a world that runs on different rules than the one I grew up in. The wedding was at a place called the Ashford Estate. It's one of those old converted mansions north of the city, the kind with wrought iron gates and a circular driveway and a man in a black vest who parks your car without being asked. I drove myself. I had a 12-year-old Silverado with 200,000 miles on it and a crack in the dashboard I'd been meaning to fix. The young man in the black vest looked at my truck the way you look at a stray dog that's wandered into a restaurant. I didn't say anything. I handed him my keys and thanked him and walked toward the entrance. The foyer was all marble and white flowers, roses, and something else I didn't know the name of, tall and elegant in glass vases that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. A woman in a headset stood near a table with a seating chart printed on cream-colored cardstock. She had the polished look of someone paid to be pleasant, and she was very good at her job. "Good afternoon," she said. "Your name?" "Walter Briggs. I'm the groom's father." She smiled and ran a lacquered fingernail down the list. Then she ran it down again. I watched her smile hold steady through what I recognized as a moment of confusion. "Of course," she said. "Mr. Briggs, you're at table 14. I didn't know the table numbers meant anything until I got inside. The main hall was enormous, draped in ivory fabric with candles everywhere. Long tables arranged in a horseshoe facing a sweetheart table at the front where Daniel and Courtney would sit. Closest to them were the immediate family tables, 1 through 4, I figured, based on where Courtney's parents and siblings were already being seated. Grandparents, aunts and uncles who'd flown in from Connecticut and Charleston. Table 14 was near the back, close to the kitchen doors. I could hear the catering staff moving around on the other side. My tablemates were 2 of Courtney's co-workers and their spouses, a college friend of Daniel's I'd met once, and an older woman who turned out to be the florist. There as a guest because Courtney loved her work. I sat down. I unfolded my napkin and placed it on my lap the way Eleanor always told me to. I looked toward the front of the room where the family tables were filling in, and I found my son's face in the crowd. He was laughing at something Courtney's father had said. He looked happy. He looked like he belonged there. He didn't look for me. I want to say that didn't hurt. I've told myself a version of that story for a long time, that I'm the kind of man who doesn't need acknowledgement, who did what he did because it was right, and not because he expected anything in return. And there's truth in that. But there's also a kind of loneliness in sitting at table 14 at your only child's wedding, watching him across a room that feels like a country you don't have a visa to enter. The ceremony was in the garden. Beautiful, Courtney cried. Daniel cried a little too, which surprised me in a way that made me feel guilty for being surprised. I sat in the 3rd row on the groom's side. In front of me were 2 couples I didn't recognize. The first row was Courtney's family. The second row was empty, except for a small sign that said, "Reserved." It stayed empty through the whole ceremony. After, during cocktail hour, Daniel found me near the bar. "Dad." He hugged me. It was quick and firm, the way men hug when they're being watched. "You look good. Glad you made it." "Glad you made it." Like I'd driven in from out of state. I live 40 minutes away. "Wouldn't have missed it," I said. He introduced me to 3 of his colleagues in the next 5 minutes. Each time he said the same thing. This is Walter. This is my dad. There was always a small hesitation in there, a fraction of a second where something else almost came out. The third time, one of the colleagues, a young guy named Preston, very tan, very good hair, asked me what I did. I drove trucks for 30 years, I said. Retired now. Do some work at a distribution warehouse part-time. Preston nodded the way people nod when they're waiting for you to say something else. Daniel laughed softly and said, Dad's being modest. He kept us going. Then he turned the conversation to the honeymoon, and I watched his hand land on Preston's shoulder like they were old friends. I went back to the bar and got a club soda. At dinner, the speeches happened early. Courtney's father gave a long, polished toast, clearly rehearsed, full of references to family legacy and the values they'd built their lives on. Her older brother told a story about Courtney at 16 that made everyone laugh. The best man, Daniel's college roommate, talked for 9 minutes about my son's loyalty and ambition and the time Daniel had driven 4 hours to help him move after a bad breakup. I sat at table 14 and listened. Nobody had asked me to speak. I had written something. 3 weeks before the wedding, I'd sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a cup of coffee, and I'd written something I thought was honest and maybe even good, about what it meant to raise a son alone after his mother died when he was 14, about the years of packing lunches before 4 a.m., so I could make a 6 a.m. departure and still have something in the fridge for Daniel when he got home from school. About the college fund I'd started when he was 3 years old, putting in $20 a week into an account at a credit union, then 40, then whatever I could manage, so that by the time he turned 18 there was enough for 4 years at the University of Illinois without loans. About the day I watched him walk across that stage and thought, Eleanor, we did it. We actually did it. I'd tucked the notepad in the breast pocket of my suit jacket. By the time the best man sat down, I took it out and put it in my pants pocket instead, folded small. Then I picked up my fork. 3 days after the wedding, Daniel called. I wanted to make sure you had a good time, he said. It was a beautiful wedding, I said, because it was. Courtney's mom was asking about you. She thought you seemed quiet. I was fine. There was a pause. Then, I know it wasn't exactly your scene, Dad. I let that sit for a moment. What's my scene, Daniel? You know what I mean. A lot of it was a big production. I know you're more low-key. I thought about the legal pad in my pocket. I thought about table 14. I thought about the hesitation before he said, this is my dad. I do know what you mean, I said. We talked for another 10 minutes about nothing. The weather, whether I'd watched the game. When I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time. I need to tell you something about my finances before this story goes any further, because it matters. 31 years of long-haul trucking. I was careful. I'm not a man who buys things he doesn't need or eats at restaurants when there's food at home. Eleanor was the same way. We owned our house outright by the time she got sick. I have a retirement account that I built quietly for decades. I drive a 12-year-old truck because the 12-year-old truck works fine. When Daniel was in college, I co-signed on a credit card to help him build credit. I paid the balance twice when he couldn't. When he moved to Chicago and needed first and last on his apartment, I sent him $8,000, told him to pay it back when he could, and never brought it up again. When he and Courtney decided to buy a condo 3 years ago, I gave them the down payment, $42,000. He cried when I handed him the check, said he didn't know how to thank me. I told him to just be happy. That's all I wanted. Here's something I hadn't told Daniel yet. 6 months before the wedding, I'd started working with a financial planner to set up an inheritance. Not a will, I have one of those, but a structured gift I'd planned to pass to him as a wedding present. A trust. Just over $200,000, earmarked for a house if they ever wanted to move out of the condo, or for children's education, or for whatever they needed. I'd been building it for years without telling him. I wanted it to be a surprise. I hadn't told him yet because I was waiting for the right moment. After that phone call, I sat with it for another week. I wasn't angry, or I was, but it wasn't a hot anger. It was the slow, quiet kind that comes when something you've been ignoring finally gets too heavy to carry. I thought about table 14. I thought about glad you made it. I thought about Preston's polite nod when I said I drove trucks. I thought about my grandson. Daniel and Courtney had a son, Marcus, from before they were married. He was 3 years old at the time of the wedding, and he'd spent the ceremony in the care of a sitter in one of the estate rooms because Courtney thought he was too young to sit still. I understood that, but I'd seen Marcus only 4 times in his 3 years of life. Not because I hadn't tried, because Chicago is 40 minutes away and somehow it was always a complicated weekend. Marcus, 3 years old with Daniel's eyes and a laugh like Eleanor used to have, big and sudden and surprised by itself. I thought about him a lot. 2 weeks after the wedding, I called my financial planner, a woman named Joan who I've worked with for 9 years and who is possibly the most practical person I've ever met. I want to restructure the trust, I said. Restructure how? I want to split it. And I want one portion to be for Marcus, only for his education, accessible when he turns 18, in his name, not in Daniel's. Joan was quiet for a moment. That's your right. Do you want to tell me what's going on? I told her about the wedding, about table 14, about the hesitation. She listened. Then she said, Walter, this isn't my place, but are you sure you're not making a permanent decision based on a temporary hurt? It was a fair question. I sat with it. No, I said finally. I'm not. This has been building a long time. I'm not doing this to punish him. I'm doing this because I want to know that Marcus, whatever happens, will have what he needs. Okay, Joan said. I can have the paperwork ready by end of month. I did not call Daniel to tell him. Not right away. What I did instead was drive to Chicago on a Saturday morning. I texted Daniel the night before and said, I'd like to see Marcus, if that worked. There was a longer pause than I expected before he replied, but he said yes, come around noon. Their condo is on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown. The lobby has a doorman. The elevator is quiet and fast. It's a different world from the house I grew up in, the house I raised Daniel in, the one with the aluminum storm door, and the driveway I resurfaced myself 3 summers running. Courtney answered the door. She was polite, as she always was, in the way that politeness can be a kind of wall. She offered me coffee. I said yes. She disappeared into the kitchen, and Daniel came out of the home office with his phone in his hand. Dad. Hey. He hugged me again. The same hug. Marcus is in the living room. Marcus was sitting on a rug surrounded by blocks, building something that may have been a tower or may have been a rocket ship, hard to tell, and I don't think he knew either. When I walked in, he looked up. That's Grandpa Walter, Daniel said. Marcus stared at me for a moment. Then he held up a red block. I sat down on the floor next to him. My knees are not what they were, but I sat down anyway. We built things with blocks for about 20 minutes while Daniel and Courtney talked in the kitchen. I could hear them not clearly, but the rhythm of it, a conversation that felt lower and more careful than usual. Marcus didn't talk much. He was 3, but he'd hand me a block when he wanted me to put it somewhere, and he'd look at me when something fell over. That look kids have, where they're checking to see if you're going to make it okay. It's all right, buddy, I said each time. We just build it again. After a while, Courtney came in and said lunch was ready. We sat around their dining table. It was a nice table, marble top, the kind I'd seen in magazines. Marcus sat in a high chair and got most of his sandwich on his shirt. Halfway through lunch, Daniel put down his fork. Dad, I've been thinking about the wedding. I wanted to say I feel like maybe it wasn't. I mean, the seating arrangements were mostly handled by the planner, and... You don't have to explain, I said. I know, but... Daniel. I said it quiet. The way I used to say it when he was 12 and spinning in circles trying to talk around something he'd done. I know. He stopped. Courtney was very still. I love you, I said. I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you. But I think there are some things we need to be honest about. I told him then. Not with anger. Not with a list of grievances. That's not how I'm built. I told him what it had felt like to sit at table 14. I told him about the hesitation. I told him that I understood he'd built a different life than the one we came from, and that I had never once resented him for that, but that I needed him to understand that different didn't mean lesser, that the man who drove trucks for 30 years to build a college fund and sign co-payments and write a check for $42,000 without expecting a thank you, that man deserved a seat at his son's table. Daniel said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, The speech. What? I knew you wrote something. For the reception. I saw you with a notepad at the table. I should have asked you to speak. I don't know why I... He stopped. I don't know why I didn't. I knew why. But I didn't say it. Courtney reached across the table and put her hand on top of Daniel's. It was a gesture I noted she wasn't pulling away from this. She was in it with him. Walter, she said. It was the first time she'd ever called me by my first name without it feeling like a formality. I'm sorry. The table assignments, I should have been more involved. That was wrong. I appreciate that, I said. Then I told them about the trust. I didn't tell them in a threatening way. I wasn't trying to cause fear. But they deserved to know what I'd been planning and what I'd decided to change, and I wasn't going to pretend I hadn't changed it. I explained what I'd built, the $200,000, the structured gift I'd planned as a wedding present, the years it had taken to put it together while driving I-80 at 2 in the morning, and eating gas station sandwiches, and telling myself it was for something. I told them I'd split it, that Marcus's portion, just over half, was now held in a separate education trust in his name, that it would be there for him regardless of anything that happened between Daniel and me. Daniel's face went through several things. I watched them happen. Dad, he said, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I wanted to. Both things are true. I looked at him steadily. The portion for you and Courtney is still there. That hasn't changed. But I needed to do something that was just for Marcus. Separate. Clean. So that whatever happens in our family, that boy has what he needs. The table was quiet. Marcus had gotten down from his high chair somewhere during this conversation. Courtney had lifted him out, and he was now walking in slow, deliberate circles around the kitchen island, talking quietly to himself in the way toddlers do, narrating some interior world the rest of us can't access. He looks like your mother, I said. Daniel looked at his son. Something shifted in his face. Yeah, he said. He does. I drove home that afternoon with the windows down even though it was cold. I needed the air. I had that hollowed-out feeling that comes after you've said something honest that you'd been carrying too long, not quite relief, not quite pain, something in between that slowly becomes lighter. 3 weeks after that lunch, Daniel called me on a Sunday morning. I've been thinking, he said, a lot, and I want to do something. For your birthday in March, I want to have people over. My people. The people from work. The guys from the wedding. And I want you there. At the table. The right table. You don't have to make a gesture, Daniel. I know. But I want Marcus to grow up knowing who his grandfather is. Not the version I let him be at the wedding. The real one. A pause. Would you say the thing? The speech you wrote? I looked at the legal pad still sitting on my kitchen counter. I hadn't moved it. Let me think about it, I said. That's fair. We talked for an hour that day. Longer than we'd talked in years. He asked me about the routes I used to drive the ones through Nevada at night, when the sky was so wide and dark you felt like the only person alive. He asked about his mother, stories he hadn't asked about in a long time. I told him about the time Eleanor made me pull over on a highway outside Denver because she saw a hawk sitting on a fence post, and she wanted to look at it. Just look at it for 3 full minutes, while trucks went past us on both sides. I'd been annoyed in the moment. I'd thought about it almost every day since. Daniel laughed. A real one, not the polished kind from cocktail hour. I didn't know that story, he said. You were too. Tell me more. So I did. I don't need you to think this ended perfectly. I'm 63 years old, and I've lived long enough to know that families don't resolve like math problems, clean and final. Daniel is still the man. He's become ambitious, careful, living in a world of marble countertops and business cards and dinners that cost what I used to make in a week. That's not going to change. And some days, driving back from their condo, I still feel the distance. But Marcus handed me a block last time I was there. Just handed it to me without looking up, the way you hand something to a person you trust, to hold it. And Daniel watched that happen from across the room, and I caught his eye, and neither of us said anything. That was enough. There's a photograph on my kitchen counter now. Courtney took it that afternoon we had lunch. She texted it to me later without saying anything about it. It's me and Marcus on their rug, both of us sitting cross-legged, a block tower between us that's about 3 seconds from falling. I'm watching him. He's watching the tower. My face in that photo is the most relaxed I've looked in years. I'm a man who drove trucks. I changed my own oil and packed my own lunches and built something from nothing for 30 years because that's what you do. You show up, you do the work. You don't ask for a speech or a front row seat or a round of applause. But you do ask to be known. That's not entitlement. That's just human. I found the legal pad last week and I read what I'd written. It was pretty good, I think. Maybe I'll say it in March. Maybe I won't need to. Either way, I know who I am. I always have. And now slowly, imperfectly, in the way real things happen, I think my son is starting to remember too.